Good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are in the world. This is Stephen King, and this is The Incongruent. It is our latest episode in the season 5, which is all about all things AI with a human twist. And joining me today, we have a new voice. My new voice is.
Kana Cosme. Hello, everyone.
Wow, the diva has brought some diva to the show. Thank you so much, Sakina. You're back with a bang. A new voice for us. Tell us, what have you been doing with your life since the last time I saw you? You were last on CNN Academy, right?
Yeah. And then I was freelancing for ARN, Arabian Radio Network, for a bit. Still am here and there. And then I decided to throw myself in the deep end, and now I'm in influencer marketing. Yeah, like
Wow.
super random, but decided to test the waters and learn something new. So yeah, but journalism is always there on my side, freelancing here and there. Yeah, all that
Super.
jazz.
Super. So welcome back to the crew and welcome to your first episode. And who did we had a brilliant episode today. Who did we speak to?
We spoke to Gretchen Andrew. She is an internationally recognized artist, and she does such incredible things. Everyone needs to listen to this episode.
She does, and she's got a background with Google and with the big tech industry, and she's learned a lot of what these companies have been doing for the past 10, 15 years, which has been amazing. And she's used that to inspire her creative future. A creative career which she's following right now, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to talk with her about all things to do with art, AI, and well, there's a little bit of art philosophy in there as well. So if you're all ready and if you're excited, are you excited, Sakina?
Very excited.
Then ready, and here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Incongruent. Gretchen's work explores how AI alters creativity, beauty, and individual identity. The Whitney just acquired her Facetune Portraits, a series that physically paints AI enforced standards, making visible the pressures we rarely acknowledge. Gretchen has been a visiting professor of AI and published research on algorithms' impacts on not just images, but our sense of self. She's sparked dialogue everywhere, from the V&M Museum to Paris Photo. After leaving Silicon Valley for a world that would allow her to be herself, Gretchen became known for her playful hacks on major art world and political institutions, including Freezy, the Whitney Biennale, the Art Forum, the Turner Prize, and the 2020 presidential election. Gretchen, thank you so much for being here with us today. It is such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on our episode today. There's so much to talk about. I mean, literally from Silicon Valley's tech corridors to the walls of the Whitney Museum, you have literally rewritten what it means to blend art, technology, and identity. And there's so much that we can take away from this session. So, to begin with, could you please share your insights into your career history?
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied information systems, and it's a subject that I loved and do still love. It got me what in 2008 was the job at Google, and the tech world was still, I had a little bit more cultural cachet, was a bit more prestigious than I think it's become in the last 5 years or so. And I got to what should have been my dream job for what I had studied and found that technology was primarily being used to manipulate our attention, sell us things we don't need. And I had really devised technology as a tool of not just societal transformation, but also personal transformation. So I thought, okay, I'm way too young to end up in a corporate world where I don't feel like my passions are being moved forward at the pace that I can, given my energy and my focus. And so I decided to pose my quitting tech as a challenge to technology, to the internet. Could it make me into something that I am not yet? I had I decided I wanted to be an artist. Artist is one of these words that means absolutely nothing or it means absolutely everything. And I decided that I was going to use online tools, YouTube, Stanford Online, MoMA Online, my ability to connect with people, my ability to promote myself to turn myself into an artist, to learn the skills, to meet the people, and develop the career from zero.
Described your practice as vision boards for the internet. And I think that's pretty cool. So, how has AI shifted or amplified that artistic process?
So, a lot of my early work, or the work that really launched me into the art world initially, as you were saying, dealt with the way information was presented online, primarily through Google as a supposed source of truth. And at this time, I did a lot of research about how the internet that we were creating 10 years ago was going to be used to inform artificial intelligence. And that's pretty much the world we have today, where what was posted online, what was created online, which is a lot of very product centric information, a lot of porn based imagery, a lot of, we have to think about the motivations that ended up being created for people to create content. Really were connected to ad tech, to SEO. And as this world that we now have has evolved, that's really what's happened is AI was given the internet, and now we have this AI that was educated on the internet, which is as terrifying as it probably should be. And so I've become more interested at this phase of where we are technologically in what is it that AI is doing to us, not in terms of what I think is the more prominent conversation where we talk about AI as an explosion of creativity, an explosion of possibility, an explosion of all of these very positive, expansive human things. But what I'm seeing with AI is that it's primarily showing up in our lives as a system of normalization, control, where every website now looks the same, every home being designed now looks the same. And even though, just like with the early internet, there seems to be this feeling of possibility around creativity and diversity, I want to have a conversation about the ways in which that's not true already and potentially not the direction we're generally heading with AI.
I'll jump in. I'll jump in here. You sort of fledged on one of the fears of AI, of this dystopian future of control and standardization, as it were. And I found it quite interesting to say that several years ago, many years ago, when people were being encouraged to create content for the internet, that there was already a vision that this content would help train the models of the future. How long ago are we talking about? Because from the public's point of view, generative AI was born with ChatGPT, but this has been 2015 or so, according to my researchers. That was when they started using transformers, I think, to help to make the models more useful. But how long ago was the vision there that they could see where this was going? Is that something you know, or were you involved with?
Well, I think we're talking about an overlap between data was fueling the last phase we were in as well. Uh, Google, Meta, the ability to target and harvest our data had value even before generative AI was being considered for sure at all of these companies and amongst researchers. And I think we saw the big hiring crunch around people who were skilled at this maybe about 10 years ago, where the talent who was early thinkers in this were being competed over and gobbled up into these larger companies out of institutions and out of research spaces. But because there was already benefit to these companies to be collecting all of this data, then I don't think the distinction between why were they doing it and when were they doing it is quite blended. I think about specifically with social media, where people would say, "Oh, it's better to post a photo with your face in it." People on Instagram like to see other people's faces, and I don't think that was driven primarily by users. I think that was driven by a desire to have a lot of photos of a lot of faces. So you got an algorithmic boost that I don't think was entirely engagement driven. Um, this would be very difficult to separate and prove this from a bunch of things. But now we're in this world where we see, yes, our facial data to unlock. I mean, I've never understood the use your face to unlock your iPhone feature. It's, always, I remember when they were doing face unlock, I was still at Google, and they presented this as this huge technological advancement. I thought, I'm not really sure that's about that. That's about recording our faces. It's about getting that data. That's about collecting very valuable information for AI.
And one of our earlier speakers was explaining that the actual facial recognition is quite a significant security risk because it can be downloaded and replicated, and the security tools can be tricked quite easily with a picture of your face. So definitely there's some narrative there that's going to appear on a future Netflix show, I'm sure. So Kana, what do we got next?
Yeah, so I found it really interesting how you said that AI has taken over to the point that it almost feels bland, for lack of a better term. And if we're looking at like search engines and how AI is integrated in almost every aspect of our life, but how do you see AI reshaping who gets seen and who stays invisible in the art world when we're looking specifically at search engines?
Well, AI, like all data driven models, if it has something it doesn't know how to deal with, it prefers to disregard it. And we see this with, no one's making data trading sets on people when they first wake up in the morning, right? Like it's what our models and tools are educated on incorporates what it can easily process. And the visibility around this, I think in the art world, really more where I'm coming from with this is a question of what it's doing culturally and how art can reflect that. The art world is not particularly technologically advanced, and I think the visibility will come from people like Instagram and Meta and TikTok. These are all very important tools for artists to create careers and to connect with curators and galleries. And if you're not discoverable on those platforms, then you're not discoverable in aspects of the art world. And so art is a lot like every other industry where we're sort of dependent upon these platforms and the way they're using AI and how they're changing visibility.
That reminds me of the music industry because I remember one of my colleagues and friends, Asri Bendasha, he did a feature. He was planning a feature on the 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 rap industry and how important Spotify was to ensuring that the music got heard. And there was a huge debate about the social media influence on music and the disintermediation of musicians and their fans by these platforms. Sounds like you're saying the same thing for the artists. I mean, to be successful, you have to be an Instagram artist and turn your paintings around on TikTok like they do in the trends. Is that something like what you see?
Yeah. Well, so I think I was a college athlete back before college athletes could get paid. And I think about the way that that shift has just so fundamentally changed what it means to be a college athlete, where it's not being the best in your sport doesn't get you the best sports sponsorship deals. And I was a track athlete. It is definitive who is best in track. Like we race, there's a time. It's there's not a lot of there's a lot of data to show who is the better runner. That's not who's going to get the best sponsorship deals. That's not who's going to get the most promotion. It's who has the most followers. And I know that there's some connection between skill and the ability to cultivate a following, but not a very strong one, not a very natural one. And I just can't even imagine it. It's an entire other job that student athletes now have to manage in conjunction with being an athlete and being a student.
Wonderful. So, Kana.
So, jumping on to the next question, a lot of AI art is critiqued as derivative or impersonal. So, how do you use AI as a medium for imagination rather than just image generation?
So my work uses AI as a step to show the impact of AI. I will get specific now. So in Facetune Portraits, what I do is I take filters and Facetune, which are these apps, these algorithms, these things built into cell phone cameras and filters on Instagram. And usually these modified digital photos digitally and invisibly. They move pixels around to give people bigger lips or skinnier waists or men more firm jaws. I do that same process using robotics and paint so that that filter gets applied into the wet paint where it becomes a mark and a scar so that every paint stroke made by that robot is somewhere that our bodies are different than these AI driven ideals of what beauty is. And so there is a step in this process that uses AI because I have to give the robot the initial image and the new image. It looks at what's different and it paints the difference into these wet painted photographs. But for me, what's important is that it's showing the impact of AI. I'm not a generative AI artist. I'm not using AI to create new images. I'm not using AI as a creative force. I'm using it to show its critique, to show its difference. And I think that's an area that there are a couple artists working in that area. Jake Yules, who has his deep fake drag performances, is one of my favorites. But so much more of it is image generation. And like everything else, I think if you don't look at a lot of art, it can seem quite new, but all of us are getting much more literate at identifying AI generated art. And if we've played with it ourselves, there is a lack of depth to the historical significance and also to the artistic process in a lot of cases.
So there's two things that you put there, and what I have seen at the Art by festival, which is where Sakuna is based in the UE. There have been some very beautiful and very transparently listed generative AI artworks where the artist has said it has gone through various iterations, prompts, and they have they show the whole journey of how the picture was created and it's a very high impact visuals. It's still there in my mind. I can still see it quite happily, predominantly because I'm interested in AI, but also because it was quite an impactful image. Who is providing this valuable generative AI? So who is the stars? You mentioned one you mentioned one just now, but are there any like banana on the wall style artists out there for generative AI?
Well, the biggest is probably Rafik Anadol, and his work is absolutely gorgeous. It's millions of dollars at this point. But in general, artists who are working with their own AIs, with their own data sets, and not just going to Midjourney and generating some images, are doing some very, very compelling and beautiful things. I hope it didn't seem like I dismissed the entire.
No.
It's a lot like there's a big difference between fine art photography and everybody having a cell phone camera. And it's one of those things where the more you look at it, you can feel that difference. And I love Art Dubai. I've exhibited Art Dubai, and it's a really great example of a market and a place that, especially because of the government initiatives around AI in the UAE, is engaged with the question of value to AI. What makes an AI art valuable? What makes an AI artist different than somebody who's just generating images in Midjourney? And there's a whole academic discourse being developed around that, primarily through a publication called Right Click Save.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'll have a look at that. Now, the thought process in my mind was I hadn't thought about it, but to be a true artist here, then sure, let's create my own model. Let's train it properly with the images that I want before I start to prompt. I think that's the equivalent of, I suppose, choosing your paint, the colors of paint that you want. I think that's fantastic. You mentioned that you are able to identify and spot what is AI generated. Now as someone who's marked thousands and thousands of papers, I can definitely see a tone of voice, and many of my academic peers would agree with me that you can see certain tells in writing. What are the tells that you spot in imagery?
From a very basic level, there's a commonality around your sort of color range. A lot of images that aren't generated by AI don't have as vivid and extensive as a color range. And it's definitely a hallmark of an AI generated image. More amateurish work created with AI will, you can see it sometimes, especially if the human body is involved in the way that the hands are. Like, we're talking everything from like extra fingers, which, to be fair, there's a lot of Renaissance painters who did not nail the right amount of fingers on hands in large paintings. Um, the but then there's also in sort of what is avoided, because the human body and the human face, text, anytime that AI is used, if it's using text being generated, it's a little bit of chaos and not likely to be coherent as something created without an AI model.
And are there any particular pieces of art, form art? Because my wife, she does expressive art, and I could show you a couple of those. But there is no real form or shape behind what she presents because it's her full emotions. Now, I'm imagining that an AI image could potentially, or someone using AI to draw an expressive art piece could make an argument. So this is my own work, and try and pass it across because there is no resemblance of it, maybe. But is there a specific type of art that is most at risk, or is there one which is most resistant to it? That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that at the fine art level, we're not going to, like, there are artists who will use AI, they intentionally use AI as part of the medium, as part of the message, as part of what they're creating and why they're creating it using those tools. There's a medium specificity to that. Anyone who's using AI because it's just the easier way to do it is less of a part of the conversation, and probably just less likely to make maybe a couple great images. But what makes you a fine artist, what makes you an artist in the discourse of art history, is to have a practice around what is created. And this is why I brought up the difference between being a fine art photographer and having a cell phone camera. Anyone can take a couple good photos, but to develop a specific way of seeing that uses the camera and having that be identifiably both made with the camera and made by you is very difficult in AI. And that's what these best AI artists have done, is even if they're using models like Midjourney, they're getting results from it that is identifiably made by them and not made by anybody else. And that is, I think, a lot of the ways that as technology evolves in whatever medium is the process that it goes through. The artist's hand can be separated from the tool. That's when you get a body of work. That's when you get an artist who gets to have a career. That's when you get someone who's saying something from who they are that isn't just the tool saying something.
My wife would probably say not everyone can use a camera with a phone because she's always criticizing when I take pictures of her. But Sakina, should we get back on track? What's the next questions that we have there?
I did have a quick question actually. You were speaking about Facetune portraits, and what came to my mind is that, essentially it's revealing the pressures of AI enforced beauty standards. But Facetune also gives people control over their own image. So do you see that as empowerment or erasure?
So I think that's a myth, that it gives us power over our own image, because we're not writing these algorithms of change. There are so many value judgments, cultural judgments, body judgments built into these apps. We're just applying them. And I think that's very different than having agency. I have seen some interesting uses of these tools in the trans community, of people who feel like they'd like to be able to visualize themselves differently. But overall, it's a system of standards that are being inflicted upon us and not ones that we're choosing for ourselves. And increasingly, we're seeing people go to plastic surgeons with these apps, with these filters, and asking to be made to physically look like these AI, these like half AI generated people. And I'll give a specific example here. So one of the things that almost all of these algorithms, apps, and filters do with Facetune is give women very, very big lips. And the reason why it's doing that is because we've grown so used to seeing people on a flat screen. We look at so many images of people every day on a flat screen. The beauty standard has evolved to try and create a sense of three-dimensionality within a 2D image. it's very similar to how in ancient Egyptian art, the reason why the bodies are sort of contorted, you've got a face that goes to the side, the arms go to the side, the whole walk like an Egyptian thing, is because in a 2D surface, Egyptians were trying to represent the full three-dimensionality of the body. And the same thing is happening with male jaws and with female lips, is that we've prioritized trying to get that third dimensional aspect into two-dimensional space, which is why when we see big lips from the front, some people might find that very appealing, but almost nobody thinks that that view from the side where you get the duck lips is appealing. But we don't even care what we look like in real life or from the side compared to, do we look good on Instagram? Do we look good on Zoom? Do we look attractive in this two-dimensional space? And so these beauty standards are being perpetuated because we've prioritized that 2D Zoom self over our own physical lived experience.
That's brilliant. A colleague of mine, Aditi Bhatia, and we performed a piece of research on the life on Zoom during COVID, and we did discover something very similar. It was the wealth of the environment that you're in that was dependent on how successful and how you thrived during that period. So that makes a lot of sense. That's just an extension. It's rather than the lived environment, we've gone into the actual physical form of ourselves and to adaptation for that. That environment. That's it's terrifying. I feel like I need to go get my tin hat from the kitchen for this call. It's really revealing a lot of things which are obvious when you bring them forward. So it's really is a fantastic conversation. So Kena, sorry, I'm interrupting you. You've got some more questions there.
Yes, and honestly, there's just so much depth to all of this. There's so much to be explored when it comes to AI. And of course, the thought that's in everyone's head, oh my God, will AI replace us? So many fear, obviously, that AI will replace them. And you can even think of artists, they have the same thought in their head too. So you've suggested that it can actually expose the mechanics of creativity. So could you expand on that?
I think that we've started to invite, in the visual form, we've started to invite AI to replace us. When we use these filters and when we go to plastic surgeons and actually get our bodies and faces changed to mimic those faces. And I want to note here, it's happening with men as well. Plastic surgeries amongst tech bros is up 50% in the last 2 years. The numbers from San Francisco are wild right now about this. In that, partially what's happening is there's a term I'm sure you're familiar with called the uncanny valley, where when artificially intelligent or artificially generated images and robots start to look uncomfortably human, there's this dip in how comfortable we are with that image. That's called the valley. But what we've started to do as people is bridge that valley from the other side. I think a lot of people who get these surgeries, a lot of people who use these apps look like AI generated people just failing to look real instead of real people who are using AI to transform themselves. And so from a visual aesthetics perspective, like we're making it way too easy. Women and men are spending thousands of dollars a month on lip fillers and Botox and Ozempic and other things that, while having had some grounds in beauty standards even before AI, are spreading internationally at crazy speed. So there's that from the cultural personal perspective. Then I think as an artist or as anybody in society who's thinking about being replaced by AI, not just in how we look, like, the whole thing with there's now an AI actress. Of course, everyone would rather work with an AI actress because she doesn't have demands. She doesn't need to eat. She doesn't have feelings. She doesn't have sort of that messy human contradiction. And I think that it's just like in any system of competitive advantage, we have to figure out what makes us human. And a lot of that is the mess and how that can become an asset instead of a liability, because we're not going to be more agreeable than AI. We are not going to be able to do surveillance better than AI. We're not going to be able to generate mass amounts of text better than AI. But we are inconvenient people who need to sleep, who get our hearts broken, who get angry at people, who are generally not agreeable. And how do we actually turn that and make that? For me, I've made that into art by making those contradictions a visual part of the Facetune Portraits surface. But as people, how do we make that an advantage? And I think there's a lot of ways that we can do that. And I do think that's a artistic framing that people in every industry need to consider.
I think that's incredible. And honestly, AI, um, as amazing as it is, it can never replace the human touch. I think there's beauty in that in itself. But when it comes to AI, and obviously you've used AI quite a bit, what has surprised you about AI in your own practice? You know, an output or a collaboration that you couldn't have achieved without its support.
I've been surprised by the way it feels to process my own images through some of these AI systems. Obviously, I think a lot about this, I'm very aware of it. But even still, when I process my image through a beautifying algorithm, through a youthifying algorithm, to see it happen and then go back to the way I look in the mirror, even with all of the education I have around this, even with all of the awareness, it very much destabilizes quickly the sense of self of what I'm supposed to look like and what other people are supposed to look like. And that that's something I don't entirely know what to do with, because one way of trying to raise more awareness around this is to have the conversation. My work makes us be able to see these changes in a way that we can be having the conversation. But even in experimenting with it, it's very destabilizing. And I'm surprised by how quickly I can go back to my unfiltered self and be like, huh, I thought I looked better in that photo. And now I see all the flaws.
I think that's really scary. I mean, you look at what happened with Instagram, and it took what 15 years or something. I know maybe that's too many years, but it took many, many years before we realized the damage it was causing to young girls and their mental well-being. Um, and clearly, this is another problematic outcome that we can expect from generative AI in the future. I think we're running out of time on our call right now, but it's a very important warning there. So, Kenny, do we have one last question? Or
Yes. So, for emerging artists experimenting with AI, what advice would you give about balancing tool use with maintaining an authentic voice?
And study art history, because only within the context of art history
sorry,
can we understand.
I had you on mute. Would you just mind? Sorry, from the beginning there, from when you
That's
said.
okay. I would really think about everything that you do in the context of art history, which I encourage studying. Art history is not about progress, but there is a before and there is an after to everything we're doing as artists. And only within that context can we understand what is new, what is novel, or what is a repetition of something that's been done before. And so, especially in AI, I think it's important to think about that context and to also look at what other people are doing and ask yourself, what is you? What can't be done by somebody else?
That's
Amazing.
Yeah, it truly is awesome. Thank you, Gretchen. That's a really, really, really wonderful 30 minutes and perhaps a bit more conversation. I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity to chat. And thank you also, Sakina, for co-hosting this with me. Sakina, would you like to just close us down and thank Gretchen and then invite everyone to follow, like, and share?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for your insights. There's so much that I took away from our conversation today, and especially in the world of AI and art. You know, there's there's so much beauty in it all, but also there's a lot of scary thoughts there too of where we're heading in the future with all of this and AI, you know, taking over every part of our life at this point. But yeah, thank you so much for taking your time out for this conversation. And for all those listening, thank you for listening till the end and make sure you follow us and stay tuned for our future episodes of The Incongruent.